Welcome to this Village Roundtable where we'll be discussing the Laguna Woods and California's water crisis. And we have an exciting panel presentation for you this morning and followed, I believe, by a very lively discussion. And first, let me introduce myself. I'm Donna Rain Shostak, and I'll be your moderator this morning and today because I'm chair of the Water Conservation Committee for Third Mutual. And in that role, I'll be moderating this panel as we look at our need to save and conserve water. And with that, let me introduce the panel. We'll be moving clockwise around. And first, we have Kay Havens, who is a director at El Toro Water District. And she is also a Laguna Woods resident, which is so important. Sitting next to her is Kurt Wyman, director of VMS Landscape Services. Over here, as we continue on, is Elsie Addington. Elsie is a member of and a director of United Mutual's board. She's chair of their Governing Documents and Review Committee, and she's a member of Architectural Control and Standards Committee, the Communications Committee, and the Members Hearing Committee. And sitting next to her, Director Lynn Jarrett, director of Third Mutual and also secretary of Third Mutual. She is chair of the Landscape Committee, the Resident Compliance Committee, the Garden Villa Recreation Room Subcommittee, and is also a member of the Communications Committee, the Parking and Golf Cart Task Force, and the Water Conservation Committee. So welcome to all of you, and we're here to discuss a really important topic today. Water in California has become not just an issue, but a crisis. We have a crisis not only in the supply of water, but we have a crisis in the cost of water. And we face many challenges. There are challenges to El Toro Water District to help us get our water, challenges in the landscape area, and certainly challenges in the residential water use. So I'd like us to start. Kay Havens, director of El Toro Water District, if you would share with us some of the challenges you face in obtaining water for us and why the costs are really so high.
Well, thank you very much, Donna, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to talk with you all. The state of California is undergoing a very unusual kind of triple whammy when it comes to the supply of water. If you look at Northern California, normally they receive 40 inches of rain and up. This year they've received in the 10 to 20 inch range. So they are really desperate for water. In addition, the snowpack was not as heavy, and the snow that fell was not retained. There's been some very interesting work done on how the watersheds have worked as sponges in the past in order to hold water for runoff later in the year. What we're seeing happening now is that the water, even if that falls as snow, when it hits the ground, it often melts, or if it's held too high up in the trees, it sublimes into the atmosphere. So what a lot of watersheds are doing now is they're actually looking at tree spacing for optimum forest and watershed health so that the snow can fall between the trees, be shaded by the trees, and maintain that water sponge. But that's work to be done, and I know that we're all watching wildfires with great concern. That will affect our watersheds as well. So Northern California has, I said, in a very tough place when it comes to water. Their water levels are as low as they've seen since 1977. Then we're also looking at the Upper Colorado River Basin, which is our other water supply. We get water from the California Water Project, which comes down via the State Water Project, and normally supplies 35% of our water. But this year, we're only getting 5% of that water, and we may be cut off entirely. So our other supply of water comes from the Colorado River, and the Colorado River is being impacted by this region-wide western drought as well. So the upper reaches of the Colorado River have not had the snowfall. If you remember 2 years ago, we were flushed with water. Everything was flooding, the fields were flooding, and we had more water than we knew what to do with. 2 years later, it's extremely dry. So the water that's coming down the Colorado River is not what it has been in the past either. So El Toro Water District needs 100% of our supply to come from imported water. So all of those water costs get passed directly on to our customers. Water costs are high because of electricity. Everybody who pays an electricity bill knows that it has not gone down. And that is not going to change. We don't see that changing. But what's happening now is that the state is mandating a 15% voluntary cutback. Metropolitan Water has also asked for a 15% cutback. And looking at the water that Laguna Woods Village is using, we're too high. So in order to make that 15% cutback, people are really going to have to change their behaviors. So that's where we are and why this panel is happening today. Thank you, Donna.
And thank you, Kay. Which brings us to the issues specific to Laguna Woods. And we divide those issues, when we think of water conservation, we divide those issues between issues related to landscape and issues related to residential water use. In terms of landscape water, we have some of the village has recycled water, and that's been extremely helpful. But there are many challenges, and I do want to mention, thank you, especially because we just heard from Kay Havens, that in 2019, El Toro Water District actually did a study for us to help us understand how we could cut down on water use. And primarily that was focused on landscape water. And their biggest suggestion was that if you wanted to get the biggest bang for the buck, get rid of some of the turf and replace some of that turf with drought-resistant plants in beautiful plantings. And there were several other suggestions as well. And Kurt, would you share with us some of the challenges you have and some of what you've been able to do already to help cut down on our water usage and the cost of it?
Gladly. Going back to that report that the Water District did for us, they hired irrigation specialists to come in and review our irrigation, and they found our irrigation to be functioning normally, with the exception of we have a lot of turf that falls under the heading of unused turf. It's turf that you just look at. When most people think of parks and everything with big turf areas, that's turf that's actively used. People are walking on it, running on it, playing ball and things like that. A lot of the big turf areas here we have are what are considered passive or unused. They're just here to look at. So they're not necessarily for anything other than aesthetics. So those are some of the areas we're looking at reducing the size of. One of the other things that came out of that survey was that we have a lot of irregular shaped parcels of both turf and shrub beds, which makes it very difficult to irrigate. Irrigation heads only come in certain shapes, and when you have a odd shaped piece, it's difficult to irrigate it accurately without extra water or not enough water. So that's some of the challenges we face here, as well as we have a very old irrigation system. Modern irrigation systems take things into effect like microclimates. An example of a microclimate would be a house that is shaded on one side and sunny on the other. Both sides of that house would require different amounts of water, but our systems are set up so that both sides of the house get the same amount of water. And that's a monumental task to undo. So we are working on that, bits and pieces here and there where it's most obvious. For the most part, we do our best to balance those so that, we're getting just enough water on the hot side and not too much water on the other sides. And one of the things we're doing to reduce water use also is our spray heads, our sprinkler heads, both on shrubs and turf are the old-fashioned, what we call a spray head. New age heads are what we call rotating stream heads, which put out little streams of water, which take a little bit longer to irrigate. So when we do swap out those, you may see your water running a little longer, but it's actually using less water. By running them a little longer and putting out a little less water at a time, we lose less water to the atmosphere and more water gets a chance to soak into the ground. So those are some of the changes. But that's a big job. Those heads are $10 each, and we have over 275,000 heads here in the community. So that's quite a task to do. We have a full-time crew that just, most of what they do is just manage our irrigation system. I have 17 guys that just spend their days going around checking every system. In the summer, we check them every 6 weeks, and in the winter, we check them every 12 weeks when they're getting half as much use. And that's the biggest spot what we find where we have water use is breaks and leaks. So we constantly, every water meeting we have, every landscape meeting, we ask you residents to call in if you see a leak. Like I said, I only have 17 guys and 275,000 sprinkler heads. So if you see a broken one, call it in. If you see it running on the weekend, call security. If you see it running during the day, call resident services.
Okay, thank you. And when someone does call in, I know when you see water leaking and you call in, it's kind of like an emergency as you're looking at it and wondering why there isn't an immediate response. But you said we have how many sprinkler heads?
276,000, actually.
And so some of them may actually be spraying at a much higher rate. So be patient. They will get to it, and they'll get to it soon. Thank you. And also, I've been reading and hearing lately that drip irrigation is really important in saving water. Have we been able to use that anywhere in some of the drought-resistant plantings and whatnot?
Yes, just as I said, the stream heads have a downside. They have to run a little longer. We have put in a lot of drip irrigation. We've converted 381 valves here in the community to drip. We have 10,463 valves, so that's just a start. But we have converted them to drip irrigation. Drip irrigation only really works well in shrub beds. You need to get the spacing really close together, and they are high maintenance. So there's sort of a balance there. What we save in water, we spend a little bit more in maintenance because they're buried under the ground. And when they leak, the leaks aren't that obvious. So we'll notice the water use going up, and it takes us time to find the actual leak, and then we have to dig it all up to repair it. So it's a balance. We are converting to drip. We're doing a little more with the spray heads now. It seems to work a little better, a little less maintenance, and it has the side benefit of washing all of the dust that we get in the air off of the plants. When we just use drip, the plants tend to develop like a sort of dust coating, and they don't get the photosynthesis that they need, and they don't thrive like we want them to. So in the old days, we used to put in both drip and spray for that purpose, but now we're trying to find the best balance here for the community.
And lots of folks, when they're outside and want to water their plants with that hose, are they using landscaping water, much of which in the village has been converted to recycled water? Or is that water from the house and that's residential water?
If they're watering from a hose bib, it's potable water.
So it is coming from the residential side. We've heard for landscaping, the biggest things, replacing turf, helping with the sprinkling system, and just keeping an eye on everything. When it comes to residential water, which is the other side of the equation, we not only have to worry about conserving water, but we also have to think about conserving cost. The cost is tremendous when we start excessively using it. And I wanted to share with you, El Toro Water District recently was really forced to raise our rates because of their expenses. And our water is billed in tiers. Tier 1 being efficient water use, it's the lowest water cost. And previously, we paid $2.65 for what would convert to about 750 gallons of water as their measure. That went from $2.65 per unit to $2.72. Not an astronomical rate, something that we could really handle. But when we move to the opposite end, to Tier 4, which is excessive use, the cost for that, for the same amount of water, went from $7.95 to $8.52. And that's an astronomical cost. And so if we can start cutting down from the top, that will be very, very helpful. The more water that we can have in Tier 1, and thankfully most of the village residential water use is in Tier 1, but Tier 4, just in Third Mutual, which is the place most easily available to see the way the usage is working out. And Tier 4 was responsible for $15,000 of the June bill for Third Mutual. And it's less than 50 meters. Can't say 50 units because sometimes a meter covers several units and sometimes the meter covers only one manor if it's a single family home. That gives you an idea. So we really, really have to monitor and watch our water use. And to talk to us a little bit about the issues that we have in the residences, and then we're going to talk about ways to save and conserve water. First, Elsie. I'd like to turn to Elsie Addington from United Mutual. And Elsie, what can you tell us about how water is used and what might be done in United by our residents to help conserve it?
Well, thank you, Donna. Just as an aside, what Kurt was saying earlier, I know how I recently called in, yesterday morning, I called in a broken sprinkler head, but it apparently had been broken like a couple weeks before when we had our building tinted. And it wasn't squirting water. There was no, it hadn't been squirting water. It may even have been a dead, I don't know. But I still called it in, by God. And that evening, when I got home, there was a little note on my doorknob that they had been out there, and wow, because I was really clear that this was not urgent, that nothing was gushing, no leaks, and they were still out there and had that fixed. So anyway, that was really prompt service. Thank you. And I was just amazed because it wasn't like leaking, but they were that fast and that efficient. Anyway, we kind of have a challenge in United. One of the nice things about living in United is you don't have to worry about paying your water bill because your water bill is included as part of your normal assessment. And that's very convenient and very handy. The problem is that unlike with electricity, where we get a report every month, called a bill, but if you're like me, you go in and look at all the details of your bill and want to see when the high periods of use are, et cetera, and how you compare to your neighbors, which I really like. I'm a little competitive. Well, we don't have anything like that in the water arena. We don't pay our own bill, and there's a lot of reasons why we're not metered and why we're not going to be metered by individual units, mainly it's a big condo versus co-op situation. The Third has co-ops, so they're responsible individually for their utilities, but in a co-op, the co-op is responsible. But the residents are still the end users, and that's one of the challenges we have. There's nothing like a $75 water bill to make you start thinking about turning off those faucets and stop flushing that toilet every 5 minutes. But if you don't get a bill, that you don't have, so that's kind of a challenge that we don't get a bill. But also, if you're just really into conservation and you really don't know how much water you're using, just the visual of how many gallons did I use at the same time. You know how the electricity company tells you used this many kilowatts this year and year on year, they give you those numbers. Well, a lot of people are interested in that, and they're interested in where their dollars go, but that's just a challenge we have in United, and I don't know of any. And the other challenge is vast parts of United are not suitable or not able to be outfitted for recycling the water. That's actually most of United. There's a small area over by, as I understand the maps that I've looked at on the recycling projects, the part over by Gate 5, there's a big area in there where they're geared for, but aside from that, it's all sweet water. We're using potable water, to my knowledge, on just about everything, on the geraniums and everything, all the irrigation. So those are two challenges we have in United, and I don't know what the answer is, except personal responsibility and owning this issue. This drought isn't going to go away anytime soon, and if you recall, the 2 years ago when we had plenty of water, that was preceded by really serious drought. So that was more the the exception than the rule when we had that little bit of water, well, it was a lot of water, but it was just for then, and then it went back to being dry again. So in closing, we'll talk about different ways to preserve water, but this is a community problem, it's a national problem, it's a worldwide problem. We're not the only people that are having droughts. And if people want to, be responsible, there are a lot of ways to save water. And I know United can do it in spite of not getting a water bill. Maybe we could have water conservation parties or something, because we're pretty good with parties in the United. But that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay. And you mentioned an interesting point. We don't get a water bill. If we had a bill in front of us every single month, it would be so much easier to be conscientious about how much we use. And although Third Mutual is condominium maintained, Third Mutual doesn't get an individual water bill either.
Oh, I thought they did.
No, there are meters, and those are not necessarily individual. On the multi-story buildings, there are multiple units on the same meter. On the single-family homes, it's a single meter, but they don't see the bill.
Well,
The bill goes to Third Mutual as one bill.
And do they do it by unit, by individual unit on the billing, or,
No.
well, see, I'm learning
So,
something there.
Yeah, and I kind of want to share with everybody, because when you don't see the bill, there's just no real sense of what it's
Yeah.
costing.
Exactly.
Up until now, the water bill has been slowly climbing for Third Mutual, and that is the bill that I had access to. And up until this year, the bill had actually approached $3 million a year for Third Mutual in residential water, not landscape water, not anything else, residential water use in Third. That, unfortunately, we're not going to see again. Between the increases in the cost of water and the fact that we haven't cut down, but in fact are actually increasing our residential water usage, we've budgeted for $4 million for this coming year, and unfortunately anticipate the bill for Third Mutual alone for residential water could be as high as $5 million for 1 year. So yes, we don't see that. It seems like it doesn't exist, and it's frightening.
It is. Well, I don't even know that in United, and because I was wrong before, I thought you guys had individual bills that you paid. So am I also wrong? But I don't believe that in United we have a separation between residential and irrigation water, do we?
No, there's actually two challenges that we face as far as that goes in United. United has what we call, except for right there inside Gate 5 where they converted to recycled water, all the rest of United has mixed meters. So 1 meter feeds both landscaping and household use. Third has all dedicated meters, so it's a lot easier for us to monitor where the water use is going. I mean, we use the same policies, the same equipment for both United and Third, so by judging by the water use in Third, the irrigation is not excessive at all. We're keeping it under the restraints that the water district has put on us for irrigation water, but in United, it's difficult to ascertain which one's that. And also when I talked about, modern irrigation systems and, the old school irrigation systems, in United, they did not separate, when they built the irrigation systems, they did not separate the shrub beds from the turf. Third was built that way. All modern irrigation systems are built that way. Turf uses a lot more water than shrub beds do, almost on a 2-to-1 ratio. So in United, we've been slowly working. United Board has given us about $10,000 a year to spend separating those systems. It's a lot of work, because if you can picture what the community looks like, you have one pipe running, between the units into the backyards, and that feeds everything. Now we have to run a second pipe and a second set of piping systems in the backyard to separate those. But it does have its benefits, because, like I said, turf uses twice as much water as shrubs do. So once we separate them, we're actually reducing the amount of water we're using overall.
That's great. And as you said, you can't separate it out in United. In Third, there are meters, but 1 meter might be 12 units in a multi-story building. If it's a single-family home that is unattached, that would have its own meter. What we do, because it's the only way to do it since no one gets a bill, is if a meter, and that's the only way we can tell, it's not necessarily a home, if a meter is in Tier 4, that excessively high ratio, that excessively high charge, the residents of those manors affected by that meter will all receive a letter that indicates they are in Tier 4 and excessive water use. And that tier, again, that's household water, not landscaping water. It's always residential water when we're talking about that. And I want to urge all of our residents, if you get a Tier 4 letter, cut down if you can. We're going to share with you several ideas for ways to save water. Cut down if you can, but if you're pretty sure that you're not excessively using water, call resident services and let them know. And maintenance can come out and check. The chair of the water committee, me, got a letter that we were in Tier 4. Isn't that great? You know? That we were in Tier 4. Fortunately, we knew it couldn't be us because we'd been away for 2 months in our RV and hadn't been home, and there were no leaks that we were aware of. And we're in a 3-unit triplex. The other opposite end of our triplex, the people hadn't even moved in yet, but they were working on the house, so they knew there were no leaks inside their home. And the middle unit is a single individual who doesn't use that much water. She swims every morning and I think showers over at the clubhouse. So it was a puzzlement. So we called resident services and said, we don't understand. They came out, there was a hidden water leak that was significant in a potable water line buried in the lawn. And they were able to find it. They were able to dig it up and repair it. And that was the end of the Tier 4 water letters. So if you think you might be excessively using water, please, follow some of these suggestions to cut down. And if you're pretty sure you're not, give a call to resident services. And it may very well be a leak that is hidden somewhere, and we'll give them the opportunity to find it. So as we kind of talk about third, we want to hear from Lynn Jarrett, not only a director, but as I said, she's not just on the water committee, she's chair of landscape, and that's intentional, that the chair of landscape sits on the water committee and the chair of the water committee sits on landscape because they are so tied. So Lynn, if you could share with us some of the challenges that you see. Elsie's pointed out our metering is a little different, et cetera. If you could point out some of those challenges, and then we're going to talk about ways that we all can work together to save water.
Well, one of the things we discovered, we actually have known them for quite a long time, there's a lot of potted plants on balconies and patios all over the place. And on the balconies, when you have potted plants, then you've got dry rot concerns, but you also realize that they're using potable water to water those plants. So we're looking at the possibility of restricting the area or how many plants are allowed in all balconies of multi-story buildings, not just 3-story, but 2-story also. We're looking at that. Another thing is we're going to kick off a campaign soon in landscaping to get and urge people at home to convert their lawns, their turf, into drought-tolerant nice little plots around their place at their own expense, of course, and then they would have to fill out a form that they can find on the website, fill it out, and then they can work with landscaping to make sure that they're doing everything correct, because we have to be concerned about the irrigation lines around those kind of things. So that's a biggie. Another thing is I wanted to talk about we need to be concerned about the potable water situation in Gate 11 and Gate 14. There are several areas in those areas of the community, in those gates, that still have a lot of turf. And so we're getting a lot of pushback, or we have been, but we have to wake up and realize something's going to have to happen. We cannot afford to sustain and grow these huge $1 million water bills. We can't exceed another additional $1 million this year coming up. We just have to do something. And I want to point out that, for example, in the landscape manual, we have just a minute, I'll get it for you. We have something in the landscape manual that talks about water management, and it says, "The village can impose water conservation mandates or impose restrictions during periods of drought." And I want to know, why are we not doing that now? So that's something that we really got to think about. But we do have to get these people talked into allowing us to turn over the turf into drought-tolerant little plots all over the place. The other thing we're looking at is using watering cans instead of hoses. Because when you're using those hoses, you're using potable water. And if you're using watering cans, you're forced to use a lot less water. So that's another thing. And in third, we do prohibit car washing. I'd like to see that spread throughout the village, that rule. So that's something that needs to be worked on. Anyway, the village can impose water conservation mandates or impose restrictions during periods of drought. So I'm really anxious to see, are we going to do something like that? So water bills are astronomical. Now is the time to make new mandates for saving water due to the drought and the high water. So we really have to bear down on the residents, because I think a lot of them just don't understand our situation that we're in with water. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Donna.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. And at this point, we're going to open it up to a discussion from the panel of ways that all of us can work together to save water. And if you haven't seen it, I want to call your attention to the California Drought Map. We've talked about the fact that there's a shortage of water. The cost of it is easily brought home when you hear that Third is expecting a water bill annually of somewhere between $4 and $5 million. But to really understand the drought, you need to see the drought map of California. Most of the state is already in either extreme drought or exceptional drought. And Kay, what are the projections for the rest of the state that isn't?
Well, actually, we're fortunate to be living in Orange County because we have been arid for so long that we have put many infrastructure projects into practice over the years. So, for example, our water recycling project, which cost us $40 million and since 2015 has saved the village $550,000. So the thing with recycling water is it's a win-win, because the water also displaces water that would be called for example, in United for watering the landscapes. So if we had the demand that was throughout the whole village, as in the old days, for potable water now, our costs would be much higher than they are with recycled water. It helps us be more resilient and sustainable. So, and we're looking to expand that program, by the way. We're doing some analysis on that. It depends on the metering. Some of it, as you've been mentioning throughout the whole program, is very complicated. So it has to pencil out. But we would like to expand that as much as we can throughout Laguna Woods Village, because it does help us in the long run to be more sustainable and better stewards of the water. Basically, this all comes down to all of us being better stewards of the water. When we look at the bills for Laguna Woods Village, they've gone up 9% over the last year. And with the state trying to, and that's the water usage, that's not your bill, that's your water usage. And with the entire state needing to cut back 15%, that leaves us a very large gap. So some of that is behaviors. We already have, most of the village has pretty good indoor infrastructure as far as the toilets. Start using those low flow shower heads, take your faster showers, and let's dial it all back in again, because it is costing all of us, and it is up to all of us to be good stewards of the water.
Which brings us to, what can we do to help decrease water usage? All of us on the residential water side. We're leaving Kurt in charge of the landscape side. And when Lynn was talking about use the sprinkling can because then you know how much water you've used, she talked about car washing. somehow we think that when we attach a hose to an outside bib on our unit or our house or whatever, we think of that as outside water. But that water is coming from inside the house. It's potable water. So washing a car is really using a lot of water. The car washes, there's California brushes. Now you know why they were invented. Just brush your car off and keep it clean. But the car washes, most of the commercial car washes use recycled water. So when you're going to that car wash, it is a way of saving water. And in between, use the California brush. For some other suggestions, Lynn, any thoughts from you on some of the things that residents might be doing to save water besides the sprinkling with cans?
I wanted to mention here about garbage disposals. One thing is about garbage disposals, it won't be long here before we're going to have those food waste containers that we're going to, with the waste, whatever company we contract with, whether it be Waste Management or another company such as that. But we're going to have 3 containers. We're going to have recycle, we're going to have trash, and we're going to have food waste. That's really going to save a lot of people from using the garbage disposals. And I don't like to urge people not to use much water for garbage disposals, because what happens, that really plugs up the drain when you just put the stuff down there and then you grind it for a minute or two. It just really messes with the plumbing. So the basic thing, this is going to be a really good thing that we're going to have an extra container probably at the beginning of the year. And I wanted to mention that that's really valuable.
And I don't know how many of our residents know that starting the beginning of the year, trash pickup will include picking up
The 3rd container.
that 3rd container of food waste. Mm-hmm. But you talked about stopping up the drains, which brings me to a question of things that we throw down the drains. Kay, you were talking to us before we started the discussion about what kinds of things people put in the drains that they think are flushable and might really not be. Do you want to share some of that with us?
I'd be happy to, because this is a big cost for all of us that we often don't talk about, because we're talking about personal wipes. And they call them flushable wipes, but they are not flushable. They're made of a fiber that does not break down in the water system. And especially in low flow environments, when you put one of those down the toilet, can get snagged. And when you're not flushing as often, they build up and create huge clogs in the pipelines. We ask that people dispose of those using other methods than flushing them down the toilet. And Laguna Woods Village has a very big problem with this. It does cost us quite a lot of money to keep our lines clear, especially when, as I said, when you start getting into these low water flow situations. We also need a certain amount of flow just to keep those pipes healthy. So, some water is fine. Go ahead and take your 5-minute shower, but just be mindful. Be really mindful of how much water you're using throughout the day. Most people should be able to get by on easily 40 or 50, but what we're looking at is people using 109 gallons a day. So just start thinking about how you're using your water and where you can cut it back out of your daily lives. Thank you.
And some studies have suggested that Californians, the average Californian uses up to 196 gallons of water a day. So, and we are being asked ultimately to cut down to 45 gallons per person per day. And right now we've been with an allotment, theoretical allotment of 55 gallons per day. So most people are well over that. We're going to have some more suggestions here, but I wanted to share with you, because education is so important. How do you know what you might be able to do to save water? So we have prepared, and I hope the camera can pick this up, we have prepared some posters that you're going to eventually be seeing in all the clubhouses. They're going to be, hopefully, in the Gardenville Association bulletin boards. If United has bulletin boards anywhere, these are for the whole village, and they've got some suggestions, one of which speaks of installing aerators. And El Toro Water District was kind enough to give us some low-flow shower heads. And if you're very quick We have some of them over at Resident Services, and they are available just for the asking until they're gone. There aren't that many, but please come and use them. They're not doing anyone any good sitting at the desk of residential services. Any other suggestions that some of our panel might want to make? We've got a whole lot of them, so we'll keep going.
Well, this sounds silly, but I don't care because I save a lot of water this way. And that is, and I have friends and relatives on the outside. I haven't discussed it that much here in the village with people, but I used to live in Trabuco Canyon, and a lot of us did this. If you've got water, like a lot of times, if you have just water glasses, like at the end of your meal, you have water in a glass that somebody didn't drink, right? Or somebody brings home half a bottle of water and they're just going to dump down the sink. Well, don't do that. Just take it. And I mean, if you have plants, not willy-nilly, but if you have house plants or outdoor plants, that's perfectly good water. Go put it in a plant. And I know that sounds stupid, but it really amounts up to, like, probably for me, probably about a gallon a week. Well, if you multiply that out, I mean, and if you multiply that out times a lot of people, that every little bit turns into a lot. And also my vegetable water, and I get a lot of flack from my son about this, but vegetable water is not only water that you've cooked vegetables in, is what this is, or you steamed the corn or whatever it is that you've used it for. I'm not talking about soup. I'm talking about water that's been used to cook vegetables. That's a very good plant watering system. I mean, a plant watering product. You can put it in your house plants, but probably outdoor plants would be better, especially if you cook something that was a little bit, say Brussels sprouts. You might want to put that water for sure outside. But, now you don't want to put it when it's still boiling hot, but after it's cooled off a little bit, why just pour it down into the ocean? It's a source of water, and my former ex-sister-in-law turned me onto that. But the point is, you can reuse water, and you can certainly take your broccoli water and go pour it in your plants.
Before you move on to another suggestion, I wanted to expand on the one you just made. I was just at a meeting yesterday in Laguna Woods, and someone said, while you're waiting for the water to get hot when you turn on your shower, put a bucket in there and let it catch that cold water, and instead of having it go down the drain with, yes, we need some water going down the drains, and it seems they get plenty, take that bucket and put it outside. It's fresh water. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I didn't want to forget that one. Thought that was great.
My sister-in-law also did that in her kitchen. She had my former ex-sister-in-law had a bucket in the kitchen. So when it was, and you could also do it I don't think she did it in the shower, but you certainly could. I'm really lucky because my water heater is right next to my bathtub. And so my water, by the time you're in the tub, it's already getting warm. Anyway, the only other thing I had to mention was on showering practices, and you can get really extreme on this, but the easiest one is most of us are on the mature side of, we aren't looking at 30 real hard. We're looking at, 60, 70, 80, 90. And at this age, we just don't smell as bad as we used to, and you really don't need daily showers, I don't think. I know nobody will want to be around me when I tell you this, but I don't shower every day, not even close. If you're dirty, you take a shower. If you're not dirty, why do it? Or do what my mom used to call, because California's always had a lot of droughts, and we were little kids, Mom would make us take spit baths, is what she called them, and they weren't really spit, but it was, a washer and a wash rag, and you'd wash, whatever was dirty on you, and we saved a lot of water that way. And I don't know why it's kind of a delicate subject, but we shower way too much in this country, and in this state in particular. And as you mentioned earlier about showering at the pool, I have some neighbors that absolutely, that's one reason they go to the pool every day is they want to take a shower. So they go to the pool, swim, get their exercise, shower off, save water, we're all happy. Showering. And then of course the other thing is when you shampoo your hair, turn off the water when you're shampooing your hair and then rinse the shampoo out of your hair later, and that saves quite a bit of water. I mean, because how long does it take to shampoo your hair? Anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, right? Well, the water doesn't have to be running all that time. That's about all I have to say on showers, but you get the idea.
Yeah, and actually shorter showers, no matter how often, whether it's every day or 2 to 3 times a week, which actually many medical people have suggested for older people because our skin gets so dry.
Well, everybody's skin gets dry. That's, yeah, it's just and it also takes helpful bacteria out of your skin. And it's just this never-ending cycle. So you scrub everything out of your skin, and then you have to replace it, right? Well, how about just don't take a shower that often?
Yeah, and when you do, a 5-minute shower is awesome. Most people take 10 plus minutes for their shower. Sometimes people luxuriate in them, going way beyond the 10 minutes. But just cutting down from a 10-minute shower to a 5-minute shower, cutting that shower in half, can save 12.5 gallons of water every single shower. You multiply that over the 18,000 residents that we have in Laguna Woods, that's an awful lot of water that can be saved so easily and quickly. You had mentioned, Kay, installing the high-efficiency toilets. Is El Toro Water District still doing the rebate of up to $100 for a first installation of the high-efficiency toilet?
Yes, you can check our website for all kinds of rebates. And the toilets, most of the toilets were changed out when they first kind of came around in the 90s. So, but check and make sure it's a low flow. It's 1.6 gallons per flush or less. And some of the toilets, they're actually much better than the old ones. So don't hold back thinking that the old ones, if you have one, are better than the new ones. So by all means.
And certainly leaks in the toilet can be very, very costly in terms of water. And we have blue tablets that, again, are graciously given to us by El Toro Water District. Can you explain how they would work?
Sure, these are just little blue dye tablets that you drop into the tank. And should your tank be leaking, you will see the blue water down in the bowl. If you have that happening, then it's a really relatively easy fix to fix the little valves or the little flappers that are in your toilet, and that can save a lot of water because it's those hidden drips, and it's the open hose bibs that really lose a lot of water. So, make sure that anything that's dripping is taken care of promptly. Thank you.
And Lynn, any other suggestions that you've got for saving water?
Almost every time anyone moves in there, they want to hose the patio, the front of their area. So I go out and I tell them, if we call security, they're going to come and you're going to get, So one guy did it 3 times and then he got a warning from security. So we got to keep people educated, keep them away from using those hoses for driveways. But another thing I was thinking about, I want to make sure that people know the phone numbers to call. After hours, it's 580-1400 for security. And Kurt has always promised that there's going to be somebody there to fix anything they see, an irrigation problem with the leak. They're going to get it fixed. So after hours, during the hours, call the 596-4600 resident services. But after hours, please call this number. And the other idea, I thought about sitting here, it might be a good idea for us to have a campaign for, Donna, this is in your ballpark, like a water-saving tip a month, and have it communicated through the, WhatsApp and whatever communication department came up with.
And we actually invite water-saving tips from our community. Yep. And at the end of this panel, when we're ready to leave, we will post for you an email address where you can send in. It's info@Laguna Woods Village, but we're going to post that so that you can have it because we'd love to hear suggestions. I do want to comment. One of the suggestions that was made, and Elsie, you kind of alluded to it, one of the suggestions that has been frequently made, in fact, was why don't you put recirculating pumps on the water heaters so that when you turn on the hot water, if you're at a distance from the water heater, you won't be wasting water until it gets hot. It'll be hot all the time. That sounds on the surface like a great suggestion. The problem with it is, first of all, those are really only efficient and beneficial in a very large house. When we lived in the Midwest, the water heater was in the basement, and we had a 2-story house. You're sending that water a long distance, and so having the water recirculate might be good. It also has to be pretty much planned from the beginning, because the water coming out of the water heater is not routed to go back to the water heater. So it would require rerouting everything so that it goes back, except for when it's going to be used. The other thing is, and sort of even make it possible, because those pumps run all the time. So to make it even possible to not send your electric bill through the roof, you have to put a timer on, which again adds more expense. And the cost in electricity, and we all have electric hot water heaters, is very expensive. It's also something that we really can't do, certainly in Third, because the individual manor owners own those hot water heaters, so we can't go in. But, so that's one of those things that sounded like a good idea, but when we checked it out, it turned out not to really be one. Any other suggestions as we start coming to a close?
I would just like to mention that the real low-lying fruit in water conservation throughout all of California is the non-functional turf, because it's, something that's a hangover from our colonial beginnings, where people wanted to get out of their carriages without getting their feet muddy, and somehow it became a part of the status culture of Southern California, having that velvety green lawn. So everybody, as we are going forward into the future, and as the village starts pulling out some of this non-functional turf and hopefully going to more beautiful shrubbery that's more resilient, I would like the people of Laguna Woods Village to just realize that this is a change that really does need to take place in Southern California, because having these green, verdant strips, that is not what Southern California is. You just have to look out to the hillsides to know that's not being good stewards of the water. So I would like to see you kind of put a focus on that in the landscapes and finding a way to really help Kurt with that big project. Thank you.
And when you start that project, Kurt, the grass starts looking kind of ugly at first, doesn't it? So people might be concerned, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we cut the grass really low, and then we spray it with a non-toxic herbicide to kill it, and that takes at least 6 to 8 weeks to go through that process. But we have cut down on the calls when we do it. We have purchased some signs that say, "Please pardon our mess, renovation in process," so people have an idea what's going on. But I do have one more comment to make about people watering using their hose bibs. Our irrigation system is, we have a weather station that has a transpiration monitor on it, evapotranspiration monitor, which actually senses the amount of water that's coming out of the ground as it dries. So that's what calculates how much water we put down and how often we water. So when people walk out of their house and see the garden bed a little dry and they're tempted to water it, we're going to ask you, don't. If you want us, we can come out. We have a tool that digs a core that goes down about 8 to 10 inches, and we will show you that there is still water down below. The roots for the plants are not at the surface, so don't judge the watering by what you see on the surface. With the heat that we get here, the top 2 inches or so dries out very quickly, but the bottom half stays moist, which is where the roots are. So if you see your turf or the area around your shrubs looking a little dry, please don't water it. Give us a call and we'll come out and take a look and see if it is an irrigation issue or it's just a matter of the ground looking dry.
Okay, thank you. And remember, look for our posters that we're making to give you other suggestions. One of the easiest one was turn off the water when you're shaving or brushing your teeth. Don't let it just run during that time. That can save an incredible amount of water. And for all residents, look for and fix leaks that you can see. And if you get that Tier 4 letter and you don't see any leaks and you don't think it's you using that water, please call resident services and ask them to come out and make your home available to maintenance. And closing comments from each of our panel before we leave, and then let's start with you.
I think this is an excellent panel today. A lot of information out there, and I'm glad you're heading an effort to conserve water, Donna. Thank you.
Hey, Elsie?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and we all just need to remember that, you know, this is a Mediterranean chaparral ecosystem in Southern California, and it only occurs on the western coasts of continents, and it only exists between a certain number of degrees, latitude and longitude, and it's hardy and it's sturdy, but it's also very fragile, and it's also very dry. And so when we can't go back and change history, but remember, I mean, nature intended this to be a semi-arid desert. That's what we are. And so we're not going to get any help from any place except that we already have, which is Northern California and the Colorado, and they're all experiencing tremendous drought problems of their own. So all we can do is take what we have and use it as judiciously as possible. And it's beautiful here. It's a paradise, but it really is a desert. And so if you think of it more like that, maybe you won't mind changing your landscape and being a little more careful.
And Kurt, any closing thoughts from you?
None especially, just that, you know, as far as irrigation goes and plant material goes, when you have questions, give us a call. We do get a lot of calls, so please be patient with our responses. We respond to the urgent ones a little faster. But if you have questions about how much water the area around your home is getting, give us a call and we'll come out and take a look.
Great. And let's save those final closing comments for our dual purpose individual who lives here and is a director at El Toro Water District. Kay,
Well,
any
as I've
comments from you?
said before, it behooves us all to be good stewards of water. And in our current situation, we don't know if we're probably with La Nina going to be still dry this winter. We don't know what we're looking at coming 2 years out, 3 years out. And so the water that we save today may be the water that saves us in the future. So let's all be good stewards. We know how to do it. We've saved up to 30% of that water before. It's just let's be mindful, get back to tightening that water belt a little bit. Thank you.
And I want to thank our panel for their wonderful participation, their enthusiastic and wonderful participation. I want to thank you for tuning in and watching this. Hopefully you've gotten some good suggestions. If you have any thoughts, questions, or thoughts about water conservation, the email address is info@lagunawoodsvillage.com. It's info@lagunawoodsvillage.com. We'd love to hear from you. And in closing, I just want to remind all of us, make water conservation a way of life because it is up to all of us. Thank you all.